Peace, everybody. It is I, the Emma, Energy Master Allah, and you are watching the Leopard in the Mirror, Canticle of the Mutant Guardian lecture series. If you don't have your book, make sure you grab that on Amazon. Grab that physical, why don't you? It is episode 20. We're still in book 2, The Power of Wisdom, and it is Canto 18, Rule or Ruler, the Throne of the Mirror. As usual, I record these live on Facebook and then I upload them to YouTube. So if you are watching on YouTube right now, make sure that you subscribe, like, drop a comment if you want to, hype it if it's available. I greatly appreciate you. And we're going to go ahead and get busy. It's hella late where I'm at right now. I have some stuff to take care of earlier. So I want to make sure I got this one in for you. All right, let's whip it back over here. I'm going to read through the canto, and then we'll discuss it. All right. Canto 18, Rule or Ruler, the Throne of the Mirror. 1. The Measure of Light. The ruler is not the tyrant of the tower, but the quiet surveyor of tides. He knows the moon's whisper in marrow, the pulse that moves oceans inside. Once man was the moon, the counter of phases, the keeper of rhythm and rest, but he crowned himself sun, burning the very scroll that taught him to listen to breath. 2. The fall of the lunar king. Abraham left the silver god of Ur and turned his face to a harsher light. The priests of sun made law from heat and forged iron from sight. They forgot that reason is water, needing containment to cool, that to measure is mercy, and to rule is to rule oneself. 3. The mirror restored. Queen and king once fell from the lightning's womb, their crowns scattered across the flood. Now she becomes the vessel again, and he the wave that fills her cup. Together they make reflection visible, her surface the mind, his motion the thought. Rulership is rhythm, not rain, the moon's return, not the sun's demand. 4. The music of the spheres. Every measure is a measure of mercy. Every law is a heartbeat counted aloud. The ruler's rod is not a scepter, but a tuning fork struck in the soul. He governs the realm of emotion as one governs a song. By keeping time, not by keeping score. The wise man rules when he resonates, for harmony is hierarchy inverted. 5. The restoration of the moon. Let the masculine remember his silver. Let him learn the phases of his own mind. Let the sun within the woman rise, so her warmth may guide the night. Then the king and queen will circle each other once more, not in orbit, but in embrace, two bodies of one light, spinning the calendar of eternity. 6. The law of resonance. Rule is the 8th tone, the octave of measure reborn. It is the bridge between sound and silence, between knowing and being known. The true ruler leads by listening, his throne the still pool of mind, where reflection governs revelation and the moon remembers the sun. 7. The seal of the new renaissance. Thus is power made queen, and queen made rule. The circle completes its term. The masculine learns to measure within, the feminine learns to radiate without, and both become light, aware of itself. This is rulership in the age of return, not empire but equilibrium, not dominion but divine proportion, not command but coherence. Rule is rhythm, rule is reflection, rule is the remembering of the moon. All right. Let's take that back to the top. All right, rule or ruler. So on a couple of occasions, I have distinguished between what it means. Rule here, because you could use the word rule in terms of like like a mandate, a guideline that you follow. Then you could talk about rule like the verb, where you talk about like ruling the country, ruling over somebody. But the distinction that I wanted to make sure that you got is that a ruler is what you use to measure things with. All right. And so if you're doing things right, simply your state of existence is enough to act as a tuning fork for people, such that they begin to resonate at the same frequency you're resonating at, which is to say that they just naturally adjust themselves as a result of your presence. That's true power right there. Okay. It says the ruler is not the tyrant of the tower, but the quiet surveyor of tides. So one that moves the tides with his very presence. He knows the moon's whisper in marrow. Marrow, that's a reference to bone. This is talking about the Shango bone. For the longest time, they just merely write it off as some nifty math to calculate moon cycles. But as I've demonstrated countless times within my talks, it is much, much more. It is talking about the very foundation of how we incarnate into this place, how certain constraints on our physicality and the way that we unfold from an egg into an adult lays the foundation for what we're able to say, the way that we operate, the way that we shape reality. The way reality looks for you is not how it looks for other creatures. They got a different range of the senses, so they have a very different experience of life. You say to yourself, well, ain't it all the same sounds, all the same physics? Yeah, there's a nice spectrum of those things, but we don't all see the same set. We all only see part of the picture. Okay, the pulse that moves oceans inside. So we're talking about the emotions. Whenever you would hear about the moon and the moon body in theosophy, or this is usually dealing with the blood and the moon, and the blood and the emotions and the metabolic cycles. Once man was the moon, the counter of phases, the keeper of rhythm and rest. That is a reference to the fact that in the ancient world, the crescent moon was often associated with male fertility. It represented the horns of the bull. And so you had several of the early masculine deities be associated with the crescent moon. So you had like Kansu, you had Shiva, in one of his forms, he wears this crescent moon on his head. Yahweh was technically tied to the moon or mountain. Well, more specifically, volcano. The ancient world was wild. That's all I can tell you. But also, you had Nana, aka Sin, who was the god of which is where Abraham came from. So you had this widespread association of the masculine with the moon in those times. I know that, in the 5% and in the Nation of Islam, typically the moon is associated with girls. But this particular synthesis that we're talking about the way it was in the ancient world, and why it's like that. It's not that it's saying something different so much as it is highlighting the focus. So you are naturally, if you're a male, you are naturally the sun, and you have to learn how to get in tune with your emotions, the moon side. If you are a woman, you are naturally in tune with your emotion and cycles. So you are the moon, but you are learning to radiate like the sun. And not you to have the knowledge of God. That's the difference. When you get the queen, she is queen because she has the knowledge of God. It says, but he crowned himself sun, burning the very scroll that taught him to listen to breath. So he couldn't rise above his equality. You born son, so you ain't got to try to be son. You already the son. Now you learn to cool down, to keep you cool and keep your focus and things of that nature. Trying to bring them together. The fall of the lunar king. Abraham left the silver god of Ur. That reference to the silver is significant because silver is the alchemical metal associated with the moon. When you talk about metallic ratios, the golden ratio represents the sun and the silver ratio represents the moon. And the silver ratio is divergence, separation, chirality. So it's what happens when you divide, but then you have two complementary sides. All right. And turned his face to a harsher light. The priests of the sun made law from heat and forged iron from sight. They forgot that reason is water, needing containment to cool. That to measure is mercy, and to rule is to rule oneself. So there's some slight reference to sonoluminescence. So, if you run a high enough frequency sound through water, it'll form cavitations, which are bubbles pretty much. And then those bubbles collapse on themselves toward their center and they explode and release a flash of light. And it is very, very brief, but that it actually gets hot enough to where it is comparable to the surface of the sun. Unbelievable, right? Let's see. The mirror restored queen and king once fell from the lightning's womb. So remember that they had to do with the tower. So this is moving out of the darkness, moving out of the matrix of the spirit. And moving into the potentiator of the spirit, which was the birth canal, which had shaping the subconscious and the self-conscious. While you're in the womb, you are aware of your own hand. You move that hand, and then everything else, you're just kind of hearing it secondhand through that water. So you're picking up all kind of subconscious signals, even before you understand the speech. The crown scattered across the flood. Flood is the forgetting. Now she becomes the vessel again. So she is born, and then she grows up to be able to give birth. And he, the wave that fills her cup, so that sperm brings an oscillation into those eggs that activate them. Together they make reflection visible. Her surface, the mind, his motion, the thought. That sperm is the thought that moves through the mind that is in suspended animation. This is resurrection. Rulership is rhythm, not rain. The moon's return, not the sun's demand. So the moon is swinging around. The sun don't deal with the moon. Like he doesn't have to, because the earth is already in orbit. The moon just needs to cycle about their earth. They are dual. They are two phases. They are two manifestations of the same thing. The earth is the mother. The moon is the maiden. She is not with child. There's no life inside the moon. Officially. You got some weird reports out there talking about this. At least at one point, there was somebody occupying the inside of the moon. But hey, until we get the pictures, until we get the evidence, I wouldn't let that take up too much space in your head rent free. The music of the spheres. So when we talk about spheres, you have the resonance, you have the harmony, and you have the coordination of the planetary bodies, but it's also a reference to the Sephiroth. So Sephiroth actually means numbers, but you associate those with the Sephiroth tree, the 10 spheres on the tree of life. That is also a model for how we incarnate and the way that the divine incarnates into the flesh in Jewish mysticism. Okay. So every measure is a measure of mercy. Every law is a heartbeat counted aloud. The ruler's rod is not a scepter, but a tuning fork struck in the soul. It's the law of the metabolism. There are certain timings happening in your body, and these aren't just arbitrary stuff that, just got made up when we popped up. These are the same rhythms and proportional unfoldings that the universe goes through. In fact, just earlier I was looking into the etymology of cybernetics. You might think of cybernetics as it relates to like robots and, stuff in the movies, Terminator or something like this. But in actuality, what cybernetics represents is self-governing regulation through feedback. So in other words, the output that you produce is brought back in the information. So the information you output, you're hearing what you're saying. Let's put it that way, which allows you to have a feedback loop in which you know what to produce next. You know what to say next because you can hear yourself saying it. That's part of self-awareness. And so when you apply that kind of concept to a computer, where a computer does a thing, that thing has a certain reaction. Computer recognizes that reaction, knows what to do next. Stars have this as well. So there's some stellar cybernetics going on where the gravitation that pulls toward the center of the star has a resulting outward centrifugal push of radiation and whatnot, and there's a certain balance that happens. If there's too much gravitation that is compressing the core too much, it'll correct itself. If it's producing too much of something, it'll do so to a threshold, and it'll stop. And then once that radiation cools off a little bit, it'll start it right back up. It's a lot like that naturally occurring reactor in Oklo that I was talking about, where it's like the uranium, it'll have like a reaction, and water, the water come in and it'll do what it does. But then if the water's steaming up and, evaporating at a certain point, it just keeps on having this cycle. Cause like once water cools down, it falls back as rain, and once it heats up, it evaporates. So it's like a water cycle. It just was naturally timed to have reaction with that uranium. And so uranium, like I've said before, is the largest naturally occurring element on this planet, but the only place that it comes from is exploding stars. So Earth has deposits of exploded star. And that's pretty much how we got here. So it's a lot of more steps that happen, but that's a large part of the story right there. And so, and interestingly enough, the reason I ended up looking up cybernetics, the word cyber, is because I know we mostly say Seba, as the Egyptian word for star, meteor. It also means to teach. But it's actually Sibar, because that what you call an A right there, it actually has more of an R sound to it, so you'll see it written as Sibar as well. So that's what it tipped me off. I was like, wait a minute, is that cyber? Is that really what this is saying? And then so once I found out the relationship between cybernetics and stars, I was like, oh snap, these folks was on some stuff. All right, but let's see. 24, he governs the realm of, and in fact, we get the word govern from the word that cybernetics comes from. So it was supposed to be pronounced like Kibber or Kaber, and when it was adopted from Greek to Latin, that K hardened into a G, good. So that's how we got gouverner. And then from gouverner, that's where we got government, or whatever. So that's why cybernetics is self-governing through a feedback loop. So this self-regulation. So that's what we're talking about with rule. Because remember, regulate comes from the same root as regal, royal, regal. So regulate. So self-regulation is to rule oneself. The wise man rules when he resonates, for harmony is hierarchy inverted, flipping that tower, ruling from the bottom up. Let the masculine remember his silver, remember his emotions. Let him learn the phases of his own mind. You go through cycles, you got to know your cycles. Circadian rhythms, metabolic cycles, all of that. Let the sun within the woman rise. When she's pregnant, she has a little star forming within her. Star grows up to be a sun, or it grows up and becomes an earth. Depends whether you have a boy or a girl. But we could all shine if we got the knowledge. So her warmth may guide the night. Then the king and queen will circle each other once more. Remember, the king's word is bond. The queen is the substance. She has the knowledge of God. They will circle each other once more, not in orbit, but in embrace. Two bodies of one light, like an eclipse, spinning the calendar of eternity. So that is a reference to the Asiatic calendar. So according to our Asiatic calendar, year one of the current Quran cycle was in 13086 BCE. The midpoint is at 586 BCE when the Temple of Jerusalem fell. So that is a whole, hidden lesson right there. And then it ends in 915 CE. Okay, so it builds this structure, and you got to understand the supreme lessons and some of the numbers given in there in order to be able to understand how that cycle it communicates a lot more than meets the eye. A lot of secrets about various religions and practices and whatnot. Rule is the eighth tone, the octave of measure. Reborn. So you're reborn when you go through those notes or whatever. It restarts on the eighth. That's why it's called an octave. So you go do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, and then that do is the eighth. So you're coming back around. Just on a higher octave. It is the bridge between sound and silence, between knowing and being known. The true ruler leads by listening. Instead of making up stuff just in his own head, if you listen to the people, it's hard. That doesn't mean you have to do everything that they want you to, but you spend a lot less time wasting time on things that aren't going to get the effect that you want if you actually listen. People tell on themselves too, so it ain't just about doing what they say. It's about also listening to see where their heads are at, so you know where to put yours at. This throne, the still pool of mind, where reflection governs revelation. And the moon remembers the sun. Remember the moon. Now, contrary to popular belief, the moon does actually produce a small amount of radiation compared to, other celestial bodies. But most of the light that you see coming from the moon is reflected from the sun, and it is bent and reflected toward the earth. And so the emotions remember the knowledge. Emotions move according to what you know sometimes. Sometimes you know something, don't even realize you know it because it was picked up by your subconscious and your body's already reacting to it before you have a chance. That is a survival instinct that we developed over time. The seal of the new Renaissance, thus is power made queen and queen made rule. So this is a progression from P to Q to R. The circle completes its turn. So we done went through, so from king to queen, that is 6. 6 is equality. So there's 6 letters between king the 11th and queen the 17th. And then together they rule. So the rise above equality is to self-regulate. Well, you just learn about the regulation at this point. So the next letter is going to end up being self, but you can kind of see how this progression. So it's the action. So the rule is who you are, because who you rule is the self. So that's the action. So to build or destroy the action. Here, knowledge, you're learning the knowledge of build, destroy before you move into it. Knowledge of build or destroy. Born's born. Born is the active moving from mental to physical, to be born into the physical reality, to materialize. But knowledge build or destroy to born. Born is you're actually learning the recursive cycle that allows birth to happen in the first place. How do you fold back into a seed and then unfold into a person? Your DNA fills a sperm cell. That sperm cell enters an egg cell multiplies, person pops out of the mama. You know the story. The masculine learns to measure within, the feminine learns to radiate without, and both become light, aware of itself. This is rulership in the age of return, not empire, but equilibrium, not dominion, but divine proportion. If everything is in its right order, the machine naturally runs itself. That's how the universe is working. It doesn't need somebody presiding all over it, because the rule that is keeping everything in harmony is common to everything. Because every cell is born from a single cell. They all have the same DNA. So when we say that we talk about that original man, we all come from the same biology and constraints and rules that the first man came from. And so the first ever anything in this universe is still informing the everything within it. No command but coherence. Rule is rhythm. Rule is reflection. You know the rules by being in harmony with the universe, with the cycles, being on time. Rule is the remembering of the moon. Remember, so remembering your members, you have arm, leg, arm, head. All the members. And so when you're bringing those back together, you remember Ya Allah. That star that sits in the moon is Nana. That's Inanna, and then the moon is Nana. So you have the father and the child and that relationship between the two. To knowledge, the understanding, to observe the image born a culture, which is a way of life. Our God, our self, Lord, and Master is the culture of freedom. So this is what brings us back full circle to this concept of self-regulation. Our self, Lord, and Master. And there you have it. Didn't take us very long. I think you soaked up enough jewels right there. So if you haven't already, make sure that you subscribe. Make sure that you like. Leave me a comment. Tell me what you're thinking. If you've been following this journey, this is the 20th episode. We made it to number 20, and it's been quite a journey already so far. And so, if there's certain impact that it's having on you and your understanding, let me know in the comments. I'll try to read every comment. All right. But I'll see you in the next one, y'all. Peace.